Welcome to Hip Replacement, the conversation between generations X, Y, and Z. I'm your host, Ben Dietz.
And I'm your host, Kyle Raymond Fitzpatrick. Every week we get together and talk with guests from Gen Z and beyond to try and understand just exactly what's going on in the current moment.
Because we're talking about these generations. Okay, episode 9. Kyle, we're approaching double digits. This is special.
Can't believe it. We're almost there. It feels like we've done this forever, but also, as I've talked to many people, it's still very new. Sometimes I forget. I was like, what podcast? That's right. We do this every week. Almost week. 10 episodes. Yes.
Every week. So our guest today is J'Nae Phillips. J'Nae, welcome to Hip Replacement. So pleased to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I've listened to a lot of episodes now and I'm excited to be a guest finally.
Fabulous.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. So Kyle, I always ask you when our guests come on, like how we ended up talking to them, because you as the supreme filter of internet stuff have done most of the talent selection. So how did we end up here with J'Nae?
Yeah, so J'Nae runs the newsletter Fashion Tings. She's also works in behavioral insights and cultural forecasting. But I really love her newsletter because I think it does a really good job of just sort of synthesizing trends and style and fashion, and while also doing it in a way that I think is really human, if that makes sense. Because I think that like a lot of times you'll look at, say, sort of like the behavioral insight sort of like to what you do, J'Nae, but like it's a little joyless, and I think you add a lot of sort of like joy and spirit, and like I get a lot of you and who you are through, and I think I really appreciate that. I want more. This is not going to sound right, but I want more ghost than machine. So, and I think we get a lot of machine these days. So I think the spirit, I really appreciate that.
Well, Joy, congratulations on bringing humanness to an otherwise mechanical pursuit, I guess. Where do we find you today?
I'm from London, born and raised, but I work on all sorts of different things with different clients across the globe. So while I may be physically in London, mentally I'm in a lot of other places as well.
Gotcha. Yeah. So where have you been mentally then recently? I mean, without disclosing anything that you shouldn't.
Last week, I was working on an APAC project for a sportswear client based in Japan. Then the week before that, I was with another sportswear client who are based in Germany. So I can be all over.
Wow.
Yeah.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
And also interesting that you have the ability to move agnostically across the categories. I mean, that is I think it's one of the great liabilities of let's call it the agency model or sometimes consulting model, is that people get stuck with exclusivities that not only limit their upside, but also, to my mind, limit their ability to really survey the market properly.
Yeah.
And so
definitely. I think I was a generalist, went to being a specialist, back to being a generalist, and now I kind of do a bit of everything. So yeah, I wear many different hats. I'm in many different places, but it's all good fun.
Good.
So that actually brings us, I think, in an interesting way to the first story that I wanted to talk about, which is from the Lefsetz letter. It's called The Younger Generation. It came out this morning. Bob Lefsetz, for those who may not be familiar, is a legendary music business crank, like grumpy old man who has been grumpy and old his entire life, as far as I can tell. But he's been pontificating about the music business and all of its ups and downs, mostly downs, for 25 years at least. He published a letter this morning and it was about the younger generation. And by that, I think he means Zs, although he is not totally specific, and also says a bunch of things that I'm interested to get your take and Kyle's on whether they are actually Z behaviors or Z attitudes. But the reason that it came to mind as you were just speaking is that it says in its fourth line, the younger generation are extremely practical. Life is hard and they know it. They are not dreamers. They're not the dreamers the boomers were. They want fulfillment, but not at the cost of remuneration. And what you just said a minute ago about working across the spectrum, generalist to specialist for multiple clients, reminded me of that a little bit. But I guess this article perplexed me a little bit because I don't know. I read a bunch of stuff in it that didn't seem, it seemed like the kids are up to these weird things, but there was no specification really about whether those kids were anybody except younger than him.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think of this?
I read the article, and while trying not to be offended, I thought it was quite full of contradictions. If I'm entirely honest, I've never heard of this writer before, so it was completely new to me. But I definitely got the sense of it was maybe someone around my grandparents' age, if not a little bit younger. But
he is definitely a boomer. He's definitely a boomer.
He's a boomer. Okay,
For
no
sure.
shade to boomers, but you can very much tell. I think two things from this, two particular sentences bothered me because I've just found them through like my research and work across generations and across continents to not be true. So there was one line he wrote about whoever he's describing not being satisfied with old tech and having no investment in physical media. And through all the client work I've done, all the insights work, I couldn't have found those things to be further from the truth. So in terms of they're not satisfied with old tech, I don't think it's necessarily that. I think that's a bit of an oversimplification. I think Gen Z and millennials are very nostalgia obsessed. And I think the analog revival for them is very real and very powerful. So I don't think it's that they're rejecting old tech. I think it's that they're sort of curating it. So from like film cameras to record players to cassettes and even like wired headphones like I'm wearing now, I think they represent engaging with tech in a slightly different way. And it's not always adopted for functionality. Sometimes it's just for the vibe. Like it looks cute, it feels good, it fits an aesthetic. It's a different sort of emotional texture and maybe a rebellion against the slickness of digital.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the first thing that bothered me about the article. And then the physical media aspect of it as well. I was like, absolutely not. Like I go to physical magazine shops in London. I see so many new releases each time I go. I spend a ton of money on it. I'm on social media and I see like Gen Z and millennials like releasing their own designs, showing you how to do it. And I think again, it's they have no investment in physical media. I just don't find that to be true. And it's not just talking about like magazines and books. We're also talking about like vinyl and photo books and cassette tapes and DIY merch. And I think younger generations are reviving underground media formats as like community objects. And within these communities, you're able to find like your people in a physical way. The object like centers the community, and physical media is a sign of what really matters to you. Like, you've got concert tees, photo cards, band posters. They're all tokens of connection. Same as with the other type of tech. So while the article was interesting, when I was pulling it apart, I was like, no, this is not the case.
So Kyle, I have a question for you, but I just wanted to read the second section that J'Nae just referenced, because so what Lefsetz says is, these younger generation have no investment in physical media, period. They don't want a physical book or a CD. Of course, there are exceptions. There always are. But why carry around all these totems? You want to be footloose and fancy-free. Now, notwithstanding everything that J'Nae just said, that point and several others were just like, I think he's talking about millennials in this case. It feels like that's the generation that has sort of stepped away, certain exceptions notwithstanding, from the totems and moved to experiences. And so anyway, I just wonder how do you take this whole thing?
I feel like, I had a very similar reaction to you, J'Nae, in that I was like, oh, this is an old ass guy, and he does not talk to a lot of people of different generations. Like, and I think that's sort of like partially why it's like, who is he talking about, or two? Because like I think there's such a sort of blanket statement of like young people, and like he could very well be talking about you too, Ben. Like it seems like it's like he's just sort of like shooting at anybody who is below him. It's like, okay, what do? Yeah. And like to that, like it's to me, and I know you will remember this, Ben. I do not think you'll remember this, J'Nae. Is like this was like pieces like this were a dime a dozen in like 2013, 2014. Like they were coming out like every other day, and just like relentless of just like this about millennials. Like I think this is more Gen Z. Like I didn't get a lot of millennial vibes, but like it seemed like it sort of, I thought like the formatting was cute, very cute, well done. Like you did a really good job in that sort of creative writing class, but like it felt like it was something that was sort of outed the writer as someone who is not necessarily engaging in these sort of conversations and really is someone who's just sort of like watching and critiquing versus like seeking to maybe understand. And like it's this is a related, but like I just finished Hack season 3, and there's a moment in like that last episode where they sort of talk about, you know, the curmudgeonly, very boomer comedian Deborah Vance, and like one of the sort of like notes at the end of the season on is a story where like the journalist speaks to how open-minded she is and how she's seeking to understand, and that's really why she has succeeded over her long career. And like that is a really good example of like what you don't get in this piece, and what I think you don't get out of a lot of pieces like this. And that's why they sort of work, because they're sort of speaking to their peers instead of sort of being like, you know, cross-generational, which is, you know, what I think we all can agree is like really beneficial to everybody. But like that is, to me, it was sort of, it was, you know, old man yells at cloud or whatever the Simpsons meme is. But I was like, okay, man, like, I'm sorry, whoever child or niece or nephew is not calling you, I'm sorry.
It was weird. So Bob is I have read Lefsetz for many decades, probably at this point, and he is famously childless, famously, you know, cranky. So old man yells at cloud for sure. But the thing that I also thought was funny was just like, you know, where some of this stuff is, I feel like very spot on. Some of it I was just like, where does this data point come from? Like the one in particular, and J'Nae, I'd love you to feedback on this. The younger generation, so let's presume that he's talking Gen Z here, know that sex can kill, but that doesn't mean they don't want to have it. I'm just like, sex as a killer hasn't popped into my feed in a long time.
No,
I mean, and I was curious, is that a new thing that the kids just aren't telling me about?
I'm not sure it's necessarily a new thing. If anything, through like work I've done, what I've read, and Gen Zers I've spoken to, sex isn't such a priority for them at the minute. So when he was like, they want it, I was like, okay, so then how does that align with like the whole sober curious movement, people becoming asexual? Like, if anything, I sort of see the opposite to that, whereas those types of romantic relationships aren't so centered in the lives of Gen Zers. Like, it's more about friendships and platonic relationships. So sex as a killer is definitely not something I've seen in the last couple of years post-pandemic. Whether we're going to enter a resurgence where we come back to that, I don't know. And I don't think Gen Z are after that type of vibe either. It's found... I totally agree with what Kyle was saying, that it sounds like a writer who has lots of opinions on a generation without engaging with that generation. Mm-hmm. So, but how do you really know how a generation thinks or feels or what their worldview is without talking to them? You're just making blanket observations without engaging in dialogue. And that was what confused me about this piece, because as you said, Ben, lots of points were like quite spot on. But then the next sentence would like completely contradict kind of himself within it. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting for sure.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Lefsetz is always good for a risible argument, but I thought this one in particular, especially since we were talking today, would be. I mean,
is there a bit of like, and I don't know, I don't like J'Nae. Like, this was the first time I've heard of this person. I was like, who is this? Like, what is this like old, not old website, but I was like, this is of a time. Mm. So like, clearly I was like, okay, like I had to even be like, is this old? Like, is this not new? It was. I'm sort of curious, like, Ben, is this like a bee that's been in his bonnet, or was this totally random? I'm just like, I'm just gonna talk about this today because like this seems interesting.
Yeah, he just talks about whatever he feels. Like he's very the likelihood that Bob hears this is probably pretty low. But if he does hear, I've met Bob on a couple of occasions, and he won't like this, but he's very Trumpy in that way. It's just like whatever he thinks comes out of his mouth. No. I don't mean in the right wing way at all. He's very anti that, in fact. But just the sort of like, I had a thought, I need to get it out into
There's
the
no
universe.
Filter between brain and mouth.
Exactly. It's funny. I thought, by the way, just as a quick aside, I thought the Saturday Night Live opener on Saturday was very good in the way that it captured the idea that Trump will just like comment on anything put in front of him. You know, they say, what was it? The joke was, we're signing an executive order that bans ghosts. And he's like, yeah, ghosts, don't want them anymore. And he's just like, he's just ready to, he's got a ready comment about everything. And that's kind of how Bob is. So there you go. All right. Well, I'm so glad I got to introduce you guys to the cranky old man of the music business.
Yeah, I think that was like the first and last time I've encountered. I will encounter his work, but thank you.
No, Kyle, you can't ban Bob.
No, I mean, I don't think it's ever going to pass over my desk again, but I will maybe try to seek it out more.
All right. Well, speaking of things passing by your desk, Kyle, what do you have this week? What was your
so
fascination?
Yeah, I am sort of, I guess, curious, especially because we have J'Nae here. I'm sort of curious about sort of maybe doing a pre, and granted this will come out post, just sort of thinking about like the Met Gala in 2025. I think this is a very interesting year. I think it's, it's a very interesting theme given sort of like the larger context and the larger sort of like feelings in fashion of sort of being very conservative. And that is one sort of subject. But like, I'm also sort of curious if like, we know, and I've written about this a lot, and I feel like you guys have read a lot about these subjects as well, is that like a lot of things sort of broke at the beginning of this year. A lot of like things that seem to be like instilled in culture broke and are continuing to break and break down. And I'm sort of curious if the Met Gala, where that's going to fall. Because I think this is sort of a make or break moment for a lot of things in fashion, because like it's an opportunity to, like, not only who is going to show up, but just like what is sort of presented and who is there. All these sort of things, intersectional, et cetera, like how it's going to manifest. Because like, I know, having worked in, say, media for the past 5 years of like Met Gala becoming like, okay, we're going to pivot to Gen Z. Now it seems like, this is sort of like that make or break moment. Like, is it going to matter and resonate with people? Is it going to feel like the Blue Origin thing all over again? Like, is it like, that's it? I have a lot of sort of like, I'm a bit stressed about it, but I'm also like, I don't give a shit. Like last year, there was a huge backlash of like,
Right.
Let them eat cake, and like that sort of thing happened last year as a direct result of it. So it's like, I'm normally not a pessimist, but like I don't have a lot of high hopes for what's going to happen. So I'm sort of curious from you all what you think, and sort of like as this sort of like old guard, old dog trying to do new tricks. Is it going to do new tricks, or is it just going to be like, well, here is Laura Trump and Ivanka Trump, and they're celebrating blackness, and we're all going to like, I'm going to jump out of my window. So I'm curious what you all think.
Sorry, I had not previously considered any of the Trumps appearing this evening, but I suppose that's a possibility.
I mean, there's going to be billionaires. Like Lauren Sanchez and Jeff Bezos are 100% going to be there. Like, it's going to, like, it's going to,
but they're not,
yeah.
but they're just not named Trump celebrating, black dandies, over the course of time. I don't know. J'Nae, where do you fall in this?
I think the theme being dandyism, first of all, is really interesting given the current social and cultural climate. I can only speak as a Brit. I obviously can't speak to what's going on in America, but the ripple effect is felt all the way across the pond. And I'm not sure if that's maybe a bit of a reach for the Met Gala, or trying to like patchwork their way back into cultural relevancy. I think from my understanding and what I'm seeing about who's been invited and so on and so forth, even though the event hasn't taken place yet. Yes, they have like 5 black men as the co-chairs, but I'm seeing a lot of creators and other industry people you would expect to be invited haven't been. And people like the creator Wisdom K, who like epitomizes Gen Z dandyism, he's just not been invited, when you have the other quite viral creators who have got like a front row ticket. I kind of feel like the Met Gala is a bit of gilded opulence in like a crumbling economy, whereas last year, as Kyle said, it was like, let them eat cake. This year, I think people are fed up. I think especially with like fashion tariffs, how that's going to affect the industry. Yeah. I think with just the cost of everything going up, luxury's veneer is like fading. And I feel like the Met Gala is some sort of branding operation for luxury houses and like a moment of myth making almost for the celebrity and the designers to try and be relevant. But I think with the people, I just don't think it's hitting and landing the same as it once did. I think, especially working in the fashion industry, like I've worked in the fashion industry for over a decade, even people within the industry are just kind of fed up. They're kind of just over it, to be honest.
Well, it also, I mean, the thing that I find interesting, and I think you started to sort of hint at it a little bit, J'Nae, is the celebration of Black dandyism in particular is such a specific choice that feels, I can't help but feel that it's pandering and you know, which is not to in any way try to diminish the contributions of Black dandyism as an aesthetic or the people who've been important to it, but it felt like, as opposed to saying we're going to celebrate Black designers or we're going to celebrate Black American fashion or whatever the case is, it's just like, we're going to get really, really, really specific. And it strikes me as overcorrection in a way that I don't think is good for anybody. I don't think it. Yeah. Like I think it doesn't really pay due respect to the culture that you're claiming to celebrate, and it also like provides a dog whistle to anybody who has any objections at all to be like, see, here's the libs overdoing it again. Yeah. I don't know. That's, I guess, that was my take on it. I mean, which is less about the ecosystem of the Met Ball, Kyle, which is kind of your question, and more just the political significance. But anyway,
but I mean, I think like that. I think that's valid and that's important, and I think it's definitely. And there have been a few things like this. I think we saw a few Super Bowl ads that felt this way, where it was like this was sort of like designed around, like, for lack of better words, like Kamala winning and like having like a liberal sort of like big win, and like this would fit into that picture of like, this is very progressive and like a lot of people are going to show up and it's going to be lauded. And now it's just like culturally there's a lot of like, we have seen the cards of the fashion industry. Bernard Arnault and like so many luxury people being at the inauguration really says it all. And like, I think to your point, J'Nae, like we know what fashion is actually about. And like, I'm like, literally I had this conversation at a lunch earlier today. I've had the conversation that literally something you just said earlier, J'Nae, about like the industry sort of having a reckoning from the inside out. It's like, I've had that conversation now, like every week for the past like 2 months with someone in fashion. And like, all this to say is that like, I think it's going to really sort of show a lot of truths, whether people want to hear it or not. Cause like, yeah, let's celebrate Black dandyism. But like Pharrell is the only only male person of color who is leading a high fashion house. Like, no. There's also I'm forgetting his name, but Ferragamo as well. Yes, technically Oliver, what's his last name? Rousting, yes, as well. But like, it's like, it seems it's the industry we know has a lot of inequality. So like, I'm not expecting that tonight is going to be like, we solved it. Like, we know that's not true. And like, it's like a really interesting thing to happen. Playing opposite to this is like Sinners. And like, that is like a really good example of like all of these things coming to life in a way that is, for us, by us. And like, it really, like, it's a big theme in the whole movie is about like, this is our space. We are protecting ourselves. Like, this is for us. And like, Wisdom K, yes, he should be there, but it also is like, there's a bit of like, like a lot of communities, I think, should be making their own spaces and doing their own Met Galas. And I know people are going to be doing that. I know of a few people who are doing their own Met Galas to really just celebrate the Black community at a local level. And it's like, I think the Wisdom K conversation of it all too is like, it's a good conversation to have, but it's also like, don't give the Met so much power. Don't like they're just going to use you, and like even if you do get a late invite, it's not because they wanted you there. And like that
isn't, and it's not sorry to interrupt you, it's not the Met, it's Vogue, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's everything when I said Met, it's Vogue. That's what I meant.
Yeah. And so part of it is also the shifting economics of the media, the modern media conglomerate. And I mean, I guess it's interesting, Kyle, to go back to the very beginning of your question. Like, I don't think this thing goes away from the standpoint of a commercial juggernaut at all, because Condé Nast can't afford it to, Vogue can't afford it to, and everything on that side is moving towards the idea of this, sort of closer melding of commercial and editorial. But the thing that probably does meet a litmus test tonight, and changes happen as a result, one direction or the other, is the notion of that level of specificity, that level of like inclusivity or intersectionality as being part of the go-to-market plan. At a certain point, like it would be very easy to see this just being, it's back to just being a ball.
Right.
Just ball.
Totally.
Next year it's just a ball. So in any case, I think it's interesting. By the way, reporting here live from New York, recording the day of the Met Gala, it is raining fairly heavily now and is due to rain quite heavily all day. So it is literally raining on the Met Gala parade.
In the mood.
Line of the times of the mood, yes.
There's a metaphor for
Can I add one quick thing before we sort of like maybe move on, or before you add something, J'Nae? Like I think you're right. It's going to probably go back to being just like an insider's ball, which is like, that's fine. It is what it is. But like I think it's, again, like it's such a fascinating conversation, because like Hollywood, everybody knows how Hollywood works now. Everybody knows what a producer does. But like fashion, people still have give it so much of a mystique. And like think it still is like magical, and like it is in some ways, but also it's a fucking business like Hollywood, and it's awful.
Yeah.
All this to say is that like, yes, we can crucify Vogue, et cetera, but like Vogue isn't the one inviting the people. Like you have to buy a table and you're getting an invite from a brand. Like YouTube, TikTok, Amazon, billionaires themselves are just buying the table. So it's like, we can, yes, critique Vogue for not inviting Wisdom K, but it's also like, again, ladder that back up to all the Trump shit, and like these brands who buy the tables and who are spending the money for the fundraiser, they are bringing the people, the designers too, etc. So like this is a larger fuck up on everybody's behalf. So like it's not just one thing. So like it's a larger statement of all of industry, which I think is easy to forget when it's like, well, they just said it's like a wedding. They're sending out invites to whoever. Like, no, it's a business. Anyway, sorry.
It is 100% a business. Sorry, J'Nae, what were you going to say?
I was actually going to jump on Kyle's point. I'm not sure how many people outside of the industry realize it's a pay-to-play game. Like you have to pay to be able to get in and have a seat at the table. And
or someone has to pay for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And going on what Kyle says and sort of circling back to Wisdom K, it still is very exclusionary, because the people who probably should be there, who could like reflect the theme in the most sort of genuine and accessible way, they'll never be able to afford to go. They'll never have a seat at the table if the people in positions of power are still going to gatekeep, and they're still going to adopt age-old practices, which we've seen are crumbling, and people have had enough. So it'll be very interesting to see post tonight the sort of whether or not it will be just a form of like lip service, like what Vogue will actually do in respect to the exhibition, how they're working with Black designers and the Black community. Because I feel like after tonight, you'll have the exhibition and then that'll be it. We probably won't hear much about it again. We'll see all the outfits and stuff on Instagram and TikTok this week, but come next week, it will be, okay, that was done. Now on to the next.
Yeah. So speaking of on to the next, J'Nae, I one of the things I wanted to dig into. You said a minute ago, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something to the effect of like, where the fashion business looks to inspiration from here. And I wanted to pose that question to you because I know, you talked about doing work in around APAC. That's Asia Pacific. For those who aren't familiar with the acronym, I was just curious, like where do we look going forward for inspiration? Like what happens next, and what are the implications of it?
I think rather than looking from the top down, like looking to the magazines, the big publications, the big retailers, a lot of the insights work that I've been doing, we're sort of starting to look from like the bottom up. Like we're doing a lot of more on the ground sort of reporting and interviewing, speaking to people from different subcultures of different ages across different regions, whether that be like a Gen Z in Tokyo or a millennial in Paris or a boomer in Barcelona. I think a lot of the work that I've sort of been doing is
I was going to say, Kyle, she didn't mean you, Kyle.
I didn't mean you. I wasn't calling you out, but I think, and especially with like the release of like platforms like Substack, which we are all on, I find you're able to find a lot of niche independent voices which will sort of dictate the fashion conversation and narrative, hopefully going forward. People who aren't traditionally given a seat at the table, they now have a platform which can reach thousands, if not millions. It's sort of a different media ecosystem. It's not a perfect one, but it is one which gives views on different outlooks, different perspectives, and it sort of shows us what an industry like fashion could be if we allow it to be. Then I think it's up to like the audience to sort of decide where they want to spend their money and hence their attention. Like in the age of the attention economy, it's going to be like the TikTok fashion journalists and people like that who sort of take the power away from like fashion's gatekeepers. Mm-hmm. And I find that something like the industry is really battling with. Like they're trying to get certain people on side, but they're still not willing to fully embrace and work together with these sort of, I guess, new voices and new authority figures. Clashing heads, a butting of heads, and I think we're going to be having this same conversation for a long time. It's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. Like I've been having this conversation for a couple of years now, especially post 2020, post pandemic, when we saw the rise of like a green screen journalist, fashion journalist, that kind of thing. As to where it goes from here, I don't think there's any single or perfect solution. I think we're going to continue to butt heads for a long while before we sort of see a leveling of like the ecosystem.
Kyle, any thoughts there?
I would agree. I feel like it's just one of the thing that comes to mind to me is that like, and I'd be curious, say, institutional knowledge from you, Ben, is that like, I feel like this has, well, the fashion thing, this is directly repeating what happened in Hollywood. Like this is like almost word for word, like exactly what happened 10 years ago in Hollywood. And we see what happened to Hollywood. But I think like a lot of this
100%
is
tariffs are going to bring it back though, Kyle.
Oh my God. That's not even a touch. It's just embarrassing, laughable,
amazing. So
hysterical.
just in case anybody hasn't heard the news, President Trump announced at like 3 a.m. last night that he's putting tariffs on all film and TV that's not made in America.
100% tariffs.
Absolutely insane.
As I saw somebody say on Twitter, yeah, we're going to see Dune 3 is going to be filmed in Cleveland. Like, of course, that makes sense. But all I'll just say is that, like, I think, like, the conversation of, like, trying to get industries to sort of understand is, like, I've had those conversations. Like, I think I mentioned this last week. Like, when I was an intern at MTV in 2007, I remember telling them, I was like, we need to, like, be doing things on MySpace. Like, why aren't there more music videos on the network anymore? This is what we, the young people, want. And they're like, no, we know what we want. And it was like, okay. And, like, the rest is history. MTV is, like, gasping for air. So it's like, is this more of a thing that just happens every generation, like every decade, and like passes around from industry to industry? Or is this truly just like, this is maybe the final straw for a lot of things? I feel like it's the former, but like, I would not be surprised if it's the latter.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. I was listening to, I started listening to the audiobook of Graydon Carter's memoir, which is called like When the Going Was Good or something like that. You know, the lionizing and eulogizing of the glory days of media. But one of the things that one of the moments that he talks about, I think he comes to New York and gets a job at Time, and eventually it doesn't really work out, and so he goes to Life, which is part of the same parent company. It was Time Life Media at the time, I believe. But you know, he just talks about how Life had been this incredibly vibrant and you know, important publication, but by the time he got there, it had lost its way and had lost its edge and would eventually just fall out of publication not too long after he was there, I don't think. I guess to your question, Kyle, like, does this just happen cyclically all the time? Yeah, 100%. And I think you could look at how the music business presaged what happened in the fashion or the film business, which has presaged what is happening in the fashion business. To that end, though, there are always new ways to spin value out of these ensconced behaviors and systems. And you know, if you look at the music business now, it is back to being it is the biggest it has ever been because of Spotify. Part of my question to J'Nae then is like, okay, if fashion is going to go through this cycle, what is the thing that helps to reinvent it? Is it for instance, a particular care that we give and a reverence that we give to fashion, you know, in the way that the Japanese might devote their attention to detail like that? Or is it a technological solution that refreshes clothes so that they seem newer longer or whatever it is. I guess that's I'm just curious of what you're seeing.
I guess I think
and what the kids are saying about any of that stuff, basically.
I think the way we move on and I guess move forward with this is just by giving time and space to different generations, different voices from different places. A lot of the sort of global work I've been doing is looking at what fashion means to people actually like in Japan, but in rural communities, in urban cities. And I think it's also moving away from being so Western centric and giving time and space to like other communities across like Asia, across Africa, across all different continents to really move fashion into we're in the 21st century, but to actually make it feel like we're in the 21st century, because we've been doing what we've been doing now for like ever, it seems, because there are little pockets across the globe who are doing really cool, interesting things and are doing it in a responsible way, working with tech rather than against it, not being scared of AI, using it to help them rather than hinder them. But then there's also a lot of people who want to get really like hands-on with fashion again, like are really into like crafting and the tactile nature of it. So these things are happening. We're just not hearing about it because, again, it's like the gatekeeping nature of the fashion industry. It's like, let's look beyond fashion's like glossy facade and actually dig a little bit deeper, find out why people are doing what they're doing, what they hope to achieve with it, and where they want to take it next. Again, it's like reaching out to like independent designers, niche influencers, these small voices who, if they had the power to change things, they would, but they don't have like the backing, whether financially or whether institutionally. And it's just, I think, creating space for voices that get overlooked to have a place and a seat at the table. And then hopefully we can come to a place where the industry can move forward together and work together rather than being so fractured, which is kind of what it feels like at the minute.
I was certain, J'Nae, that you were going to say, no, we're just going to take inspiration from Japan and make everything super kawaii.
Is that because my topic is Japan and kawaii?
Well, I mean, that was one reason. Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. Like the whole, so kawaii, roughly speaking, means cute. And is a kind of both an adjective and a noun describing a subculture, right?
I think kind of what I found really interesting was I think it's the New York Times just released their whole like April culture issue, and it was dedicated solely to Japan. And I don't think that's a mistake given like the over tourism and sort of rising interest in Japanese culture. Full disclaimer, I went for 2 weeks last year and I'm going back for a month this year. So I'm very invested in this topic.
Wow.
Lucky.
But I think going there, it was my first time in Asia, having a complete culture shock in a good way. What I found really interesting about the kawaii factor in Japan's love of cuteness is how it's entirely cross-generational. Like, it's not just Gen Alpha, Gen Z, millennials. Like, I would go to like anime and figurine collecting shops in like, I think it's Akihabara in Tokyo. And there would be like boomers and older adults there, like hunting down specific things, which I found fascinating how they were it's like quite tribal in a sense, like they're really dedicated to their particular like kawaii communities, whether it's like Hello Kitty, Pokemon, Sonny's Angels. It's, I guess the cuteness has been commodified in a way, and you have those dedicated fandoms who like follow these particular characters and stories like to the end. But I think what I really wanted to get both of your thoughts on is, why do you think kawaii culture and Japan's love of cuteness is like resonating so much with people outside of Japan? Like for me, it feels like it's, especially as a like zillennial, so millennial, borderline Gen Z, it's like comfort, it's stability, it's also nostalgic for like things from my childhood, which is sort of coming back around. But then you have like Gen Zers and younger who they can't really be nostalgic for it because they never experienced it the first time around. So how is it able to speak to me, to speak to them, and to speak to older adults? Like, I would love to know your thoughts on why you think the cuteness factor has such a chokehold on culture at the minute.
Well, I mean, from my standpoint, it gets to exactly the cuteness, right? It is a totally emotional it's a totally emotional state, right? And in a universe where there are so many things happening, and we are so aware of things that are happening that are not cute, that it's a retreat to comfort. And then beyond that, it's that the see, now, J'Nae, I lost my train of thought. Kyle, jump in quick, save me.
I was gonna say that, like, you know, the thing that really jumped out to me, which I had not thought about until I read that story, was that, like, sort of the cuteness being such a thing in Japan, and a part of Japanese culture that isn't new, that is sort of like pervasive, is that to me it sort of seems like it's a way of looking at the world and seeing each other. Like, there's sort of like, it's a sort of texture to the culture that is always there and always has been there, and it's a part of a belief system. And it reminds me of something that I forgot what it was. I think it might have been an interview in Financial Times with the curator Koyo Kuo, and like how sort of like Senegalese and African spiritualism really informs her work, because it's a very different belief system. And like that, I think it's an expression of a culture and a way of seeing, which I thought was fascinating. That it's less to that is like, it's less about something being cute, and it's more of a way of sort of seeing beauty and seeing this like goodness and that sort of thing. And I think that, to the point of what you were sort of saying, Ben, is like why it sort of is everywhere is because like it appeals cross-generationally. Like anything can be cute and anyone can be cute. It just depends on, like, you know, if you choose to see it and if you choose to sort of act in that way. And I think that is sort of like thinking of cuteness less as a sort of like visual aesthetic and more as a sort of almost like ideology. I think that is fascinating, and sort of why it might be sort of such a global thing now. I don't think people think about it that way, but I think in thinking about it that way, I think it unlocks a lot of why it works so well for so many people. It's also why like dogs are so on trend right now, and like have been on trend, is because like they are a perfect example of just sort of like classic cuteness personified. They say babies forever. Anyway, Ben.
Well, okay, so staying babies forever is, I mean, and cute, non-threatening, human, like emotive and emotional, all of these things that other elements of the Gestalt, be they AI, be they, you know, overwhelming tech, be they tech, you know, isolationism, etc. Like they all, it is in opposition to those macro forces that we end up with this, you know, very precious, highly appealing, non-threatening, you know, aesthetic kind of approach. I think that's the reason.
I definitely agree. I think it's like a collective yearning for softness and like emotional resistance. Sure. It's like a soft rebellion against like hard and harsh realities. So I definitely think that's why it's probably taken off globally. It's like a form of escapism and release as well. Like, I know 100%. I bought many figurines from there. Like, I don't know what they mean or what they are, but I look at them, I'm like, that's cute. I like that. And it makes me feel good, and it makes me sort of forget about the chaos of the world. And I've sort of also joined like groups and online forums for these like particular creatures and things, just to see what goes down there. And it's a really nice, safe space, which is something I think everyone needs right now, whatever generation you're from.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Well, and one probably that because it's universal is insulated a little bit from the politicization of the space as well, which is one thing. And J'Nae kind of brings us to your final topic, which was the Gen Z creator class and the ways that people like Speed, you know, on his visit to China, may be getting sort of co-opted to or unintentionally buying into these larger systems of power. I don't really have a read on that kind of creator class, to be honest. I rely on people like the two of you to tell me. I don't know. I mean, I have a read on it, of course, but I don't feel like I know very much about it.
You're not getting it in your okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm not native to it, so I'm interested to hear.
I think this is definitely a juicy topic and an albeit controversial one, because I use two different people as like case studies to talk about this sort of new Gen Z creator class. So in one corner, you have Johnny Somali, who's facing prison time in South Korea for deliberately disruptive and culturally offensive behavior. He even got punched by a former elite soldier because the Koreans were like, we've had enough of you, stop disrespecting our country. Who got fined, but was still really glad he did it, this soldier, because he was tired of these like nuisance influencers. So on one side you have Johnny Somali and the case for like, I guess, digital villains, we can call him. And then on the other side you have like IShowSpeed, who had a 2-week really high profile tour around China, which the Chinese government sort of saw as like a soft power win because it portrays China in a complete different way to how it's normally portrayed in the Western media. Like he was doing really culturally like attuned things, such as like doing martial arts, going to the Great Wall of China, doing all of the things you would expect a tourist in the country to do, but giving like full-on live stream access so you can see it in real time. You can see how sort of technologically advanced the country is, how welcoming it is to a foreigner who's also a creator of color. So you have these two Gen Z creators who is completely culturally offensive and like just a bit of a digital hooligan. Then you have another one who's been seen as sort of this cultural savior in a sense. So it also begs the question, what role foreign influencers have when they go abroad in shaping either pro or like con narratives, and sort of the responsibility audiences have on putting all of their like stock and faith in these influencers to either like relay a country for what it is, paint it with rose tinted glasses. And I don't know, it's such a confusing and interesting topic because you have two very different people doing two very different things, and it sort of makes me think, which one's going to win, or is just influencer culture going to like collapse? Because controversial influencers, clickbait, they are rewarded for being controversial, but then like culturally sensitive ones who are sort of on side with wherever they go, they're rewarded with like love and likes. So which one wins is my question, and how far can we go before it like implodes?
I feel like it's funny because like it's interesting that you frame it that way, because like to me, IShowSpeed isn't that far off from Johnny, because like his whole brand sort of like was built upon being very sort of like pushing a lot of buttons and like being very brash and just like being a bit out there. And like so like that was to me a bit like interesting that like he was sort of like not given like a white glove treatment, but like really like sort of was basically sort of chauffeured around the country. And I think he's I think it's probably his manager. He's gotten probably managers who get it and are like, hey, chill, like don't do anything wild. And I think he's like getting
got
a big
commercial out of it. So I guess it won for him in the end. He was in a Chinese commercial. So
exactly. And so like I think that like he's sort of growing up, but like all this to say is that like what was interesting to me about like these two things coming together is sort of like, to me, I see it as a sort of evolution of say like the class right before them, which is, you know, less so Mr. Beast, more so the Paul brothers, and how like that is now like just the norm.
Right.
Which is a bit sort of like, I don't think it's alarming. I don't think like part of me is like, who gives a shit?
The
but
Paul
also
brothers
like,
are alarming?
well, I mean, yes, but like, I think it's like, it's a bit wild that like, that is now, and like, you know, taken especially with like, say the Manosphere podcast world is like, that is not what you have to do to be the biggest creator, but like it's a bit of what you have to do. Is like you have to be a bit sensational. You have to be a bit sort of like, it's not even a type of macho. It's a type of like
performative,
shitty
like
teen
disruption.
Boy. Yeah.
Algorithm
it's like,
rewards extremes, basically.
Yeah, and like, and obviously, yes, like that is like has been proven as like a thing, but like it's so interesting now that we're getting to like the end of the cycle, and like perhaps it will collapse, to your point, is that like it's getting to the point where like this extremeness is getting more and more, probably less because they're even like that. It's probably more because like they know that's what you have to do to break through, and like obviously like you need to make money, need to make views, so you're gonna do that stuff.
It is interesting. The most recent edition of After School, Casey Lewis's friend of the pod, Casey Lewis's newsletter, talks about how people are getting sick of TikTok. And one of the little screen grabs in this, you know, conversation says, "I've been spending a lot more time on Pinterest and Tumblr lately, and they're so much more calm and nice." And so you sort of, exactly to your point, like you wonder if those things make a comeback because the sensationalism has run its course.
I mean, I was going to say that sort of leads exactly to what you were saying at the beginning, J'Nae, about like, you know, physical media and old tech, and that sort of like those spaces exist You don't have to be on the chaotic spaces or indulge in the chaotic things, but that also requires like very evolved thinking, which takes learning, growing, aging, et cetera, et cetera.
I bought a DJ mixer for my kids to learn to DJ on vinyl over the weekend.
Fantastic. I still have my iPod from 2013 and I refuse to get rid of it. You can't update it. You can't add new music. So I've got some very questionable song choices on there, but I will not let go of it.
Good for you.
So this is exclusive for our video audience. iPod Nano.
Brilliant.
Damn.
iPod. I'm not sure which one that is.
I think that's
this one. Let's see. It doesn't actually have a wheel that turns, but so now we're all showing up
mine are over there
on camera
on the bookshelf.
Kyle, you always have to have your iPod at arm's length.
I guess.
All right. Well, J'Nae, it has been a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for joining us here on Hip Replacement. Where can people find you?
People can find me on Substack at fashiontings, tingz.substack.com, and just everything everywhere else is just J'Nae Phillips. Instagram, LinkedIn. I don't do X, Twitter so much because that's a whole nother kettle of fish. Yeah. That's where you can find me. Thank you so much for having me as well. It's been really fun. It's my first podcast as well. So
yeah, fantastic. We should have said that at the top. Well, you did fantastically well.
Yes.
So
thank
you for joining us and being your first. All right. Well, everybody, we are going to be back next Monday. And in the meantime, please follow, like, subscribe. Hip Replacement, Kyle's newsletter, The Trend Report, which is a sensational multi-times a week accounting of all of the most interesting and most nefarious things on the internet. Fashion Tings, as J'Nae said, and then I publish one called Sick Weekly. It comes out on Thursdays and is me scraping the plaque off my brain. Well, J'Nae, I guess we will all find out what happens to the Met Gala later tonight, and we'll reconvene in the comments to
definitely
compare notes.
Yes.
All right. Cool.
All right, y'all.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.